The events of the evening of Thursday, the 16th of March, 1992. This is a statement that I made to the company Overseas Technical Services while working in Warri, Delta State, Nigeria. It is a report of an incident which was a day-to-day occurrence in that time and place. At about 20-30 hours, that's 8:30, I was being driven by Meshack in the OTS car number 030 from Oghenovo Estate, PTI Road, Warri. It was dark and there were no lights in the street. We turned left from the exit gate and had travelled about 200 metres when I saw a torch and a group of people blocking the road in front of us. There were vehicles blocking the road and we were forced to stop. I then saw at least 5 of the men were armed with guns which they were pointing at our car. The guns were crude-looking weapons and the men were not in uniform. My main attention was then on the man closest to me, who was pointing a sawn-off shotgun at my head from about 1 metre away. His face was wild and showed great excitement. The robbers clustered around the car and the doors were open. I got out of the car and told Meshack to give them anything they wanted. Glancing in his direction, I could see that at least 2 guns were trained on him. At least 3 sawn-off shotguns were pointed at me within touching distance, 2 at my head and 1 at my lower trunk. A 4th gun was held in my direction by a robber about 3 metres away to my right. There seemed to be a lot of robbers and they were all very agitated. I remember thinking how interesting it was and how incompetent they were. They were all shouting silly things like, "We are robbers," and "We have guns and we will shoot you." It all seemed pathetic. They were totally hyped up and in panic. I said, "I will give you my money," and got my wallet out. One of them snatched it. They were all babbling and shouting in the most unprofessional way that completely destroyed any respect that I might have had for them. I could not understand what they wanted me to do, so I started to get back into my car. A gun went off about 3 metres from me and I saw a sheet of flames and sparks about ½ metre long, accompanied by a very disappointing bang. I remember thinking, this is real then, and being aware of 3 guns poked at me. Then the raving man in front of me hit me on the head with the muzzle of his gun, and momentarily my vision failed. I heard the impact and saw stars. My knees must have weakened for a second or so. Then I stood up to my full height, put my hand on my head. I felt the blood pouring through my fingers, and I said, "What did you do that for, you prat? You can have what you want." He started shouting even louder, and I still could not understand what he wanted. For a split second I thought he was going to shoot me. The gun was about 6 inches from my nose, and even he could not have missed at that range. But the moment passed, and the 3 clustered around me started sticking their hands in my pockets. The man who hit me pulled out a bunch of keys and stuck them in his pocket. I said, "What do you want them for?" I nearly said, "You prick," but remembered the gun in his hand. He then saw my gold puzzle ring and pulled it off my finger. He must have taken my watch at the same time, but there was so much blood running down my arm I did not notice. By this time, they all seemed to have lost interest in shooting me and started to scramble into the OTS car that I'd just vacated. There must have been at least 6 and probably 7 of them, and they had difficulty squeezing in. I could not see the driver, but the engine failed to start for a second or two. Then there was a grinding of gears, a little judder, and it reversed and stalled. It started again and at last gained enough speed to do a U-turn with the tyres screeching. The gathering crowd seemed impressed. I then realised I must look quite a sight, as I could feel blood running down my arms. I wiped my eyes clear of what I thought was sweat, but found that too was blood. A small, trembling crowd looked at me and Meshack. They came into view, holding his mouth. I asked him if he was hurt, and he showed me a loose tooth. A police car came into sight from the direction which the robbers had taken. I got to the centre of the road and flagged the car down. It slowed to a walking pace, and I could see at least 2 armed policemen as well as the driver. They looked in my direction but carried on slowly. The crowd started telling them that I had been injured by armed robbers and that they could catch them. The police seemed disinterested, so I went forward again, tapped on the window of the police car with my blood-drenched hand. I smeared blood over the window. They looked at me again and continued driving forward slowly. They turned left and came to a stop facing the gates of a secure estate. The gates were opened and the police went through. I started to follow, but the gates were being closed and I didn't know what sort of situation I would be walking in, so I turned back. Meshack asked me what we should do, and the crowd were saying, "Sorry, sorry, sorry." They were obviously very frightened, so I started to walk back to OTS. A motorcycle taxi offered me a lift, but I thought that would be too dangerous. I approached the Oghenovo Estate. I heard shouting and saw a white car, which must have been ours, parked outside the wall facing the road with a very loud argument going on. I heard phrases like, "Where is the money? He gave you the money." And as I drew level with them, "You took the money from the man." I avoided looking in their direction and tried not to hurry. I then heard one say, "That man, there, the Aibo." By this time I was level with the Oghenovo gates, and I looked back for Meshack. The gate was ajar, and I hurried Meshack through and told the gateman to close the gates. I went to the office to report the incident to the deputy contract manager, who was in conversation with Mr. Obi of Shell at the time. They were anxious for the other OTS workers not to see me, as they did not want them to quit. There were continuing sounds of gunfire during that night, but that was normal for Warri at that time. And as usual, they were dead on the streets in the morning. I have been robbed of 300 naira, a Casio watch valued at about £5 sterling, and a broken golden puzzle ring worth about £150 sterling. I telephoned my son the following day to cancel my credit cards, although I doubt that the thieves would have the sense to use them. I did not think I could remain so objective about the situation if it ever happened again, as recalling the details forced me to consider the danger I was not really conscious of at the time. I now recall the barrel of the sawn-off shotgun with fear that was not manifest at the time of the incident. About 2 weeks later, I suffered post-traumatic shock and was placed in intensive care for some days in my own room with a mobile cardiograph, etc. rigged up, and the company nurse was in attendance with the doctor making frequent visits. Months later, my documents from the wallet were returned to me from Switzerland through someone who had noticed them in a Nigerian police station in another part of the country.